Please give everyone a big round of applause. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, everyone, for coming on, and we'll get right into it. Nick, people seem to have been saying that, ever since the television hit the shelves, that radio is dying off and it's the end for radio. Are we seeing more scaremongering like that again today, or is radio actually in decline?
So radio in decline, yes, the great 1950s discussion that has never left us. Radio is the cockroach of the surviving media industry because it can survive anything. So let's walk through, first of all, so television, colour television, FM radio, digital, podcasts, streaming, you name it, radio has seen them all off. It remains sometimes not the best of story, but it remains one of the most publicised items inside media today, and today's ratings day, so lots and lots of stories today. But if you were to open the United States media on a day of ratings, you actually see very little talked about for radio in the United States. In fact, few of us can name beyond Howard Stern a lot of those really large, big names. But for Australia, we continue to provide strong radio talent. So companies invest heavily in radio talent. We have yielded some of the best radio talent in the world. We continue to hold the best audience for the world. We're world leaders when it comes to radio because we've continued to move the story along. So in answer to your question, are we in decline? I've never seen it in decline. Today's audience numbers, again, are showing that radio is really strong across all brands. But the good news is, and the better news is, that with a new generation now coming through, we're now moving out of this AM, FM world. If we're on a train, let's face it, we're not seeing many people with tuner radios anymore. It's all digital. So we are now moving to be all in the same space. So to answer your question, we just have to move with the innovation.
Darcy, you had a stellar career in audio production and you chucked it in to start a podcast company. Why?
That's what my wife said too. So, yes, I worked 10 years in radio and I loved it. And I was saying to these guys before, there's nothing that beats the thrill of producing a live radio show. Nothing at all. You've got the adrenaline, you've got the news of the day coming into the show, you're making jingles if you're an audio producer person, you're writing run sheets if you're a content producer. Like, there is an energy in radio that is quite frankly addictive. But what I saw is the show that I worked on, a show called Kate and Marty, they had a podcast, and podcasting really came about in radio land because it was the afterthought of a show. You'd have to cut up all the breaks and put it out on a podcast. And that podcast alone, and this was 10 years ago, had 20 million downloads. And yet in the radio station paid no attention to that. And I was like, look, there's an opportunity here from a podcasting perspective to really elevate what this can be. And they were kind of like, no, like radio's what we do, you know? And so I was like, cool, I'll start a podcast company and go through the journey of creating podcasts for other people who have different ideas than what radio could offer at that time. And I think just quickly, 2 points. I think it used to be that if you wanted to broadcast to an audience, you had to go down to Townsville and work your way up and get to the position where you're in a capital city radio station to talk to an audience. And I think the thing that excited me the most is podcasting opened up that platform where if you had a microphone, and now if you have a microphone that's $89, gets you incredible quality and you can start to build a show. And that still excites me 10 years on now doing podcasting.
Nat, Darcy's talked about the thrill of live radio. You get a lot of thrills at Kiss Breakfast every day. So as the big cheese there, how do you stay sane with the chaos of every day doing your job?
Oh. I always say when we finish the radio show, it's like a come down. Like it's a huge come down because during the show, whether it be stress, excitement, laughter, you know, someone's yelling at someone because something's not loaded or whatever, it truly is the most full-on thing that you almost like black out during it. And then everything kind of dies down. You know, I worked on a very loud show, the Kyle and Jackie O show. So when that show ended and Kyle and Jackie O walked out the door, I remember everyone just kind of sat there and was like, whoa, what just happened every single day. But we all work in that industry because that's what we thrive on, right? So every day I go in and I look forward to the chaos that it brings. And that's why live radio and the traditional media that it is, you can't, no offense, Darcy, but you can't get that with podcasting. You can't, everything you put out there, is out there, and that's the thrill. Nothing's chopped up and edited. Some shows pre-record things, but generally speaking, radio is live. That's why we got time calls. That's why we got live news. That's why we can report on things and be the first to report on them. Whereas a podcast or, a pre-recorded panel show can't do those things like we can do them. So I thrive on the live chaos of it all.
Okay, so if you couldn't say live and local as being the reason why radio is superior to podcasting, what would you say it has? What's the advantage?
Well, I think we cover off with how much we've evolved in the industry. We no longer see ourselves as a radio show solely. We're across a number of multimedia platforms. So when it comes to podcasting, they're released across all the podcast platforms and that's where they live. And obviously social elements, we cover off podcasting, right, like broadcasting to people live through the radio. Plus, we've got the podcast, the catch-up podcast afterward. And, when I was working on the show, we were overtaking people that were purely podcasts, and that was just people listening to the catch-up of the radio show. So I feel as if we kind of have our toe in a number, like we've got our fingers in a lot of pies by doing radio because we've got that ability to be live and local, depending if you're a network show or not. But then we can also later on repurpose our show and push it out as different types of content across a number of platforms.
Nick, do you have anything to add to that sentiment?
Yeah, so radio always must be bold, and I never think that podcast is a threat. If I
so sorry.
What is it? No, sorry, it's in.
I hope I get a
We
right
respect
reply.
you so highly.
Sorry, I see it complimentary. So I love being on the tram and seeing all headphones. I love lots and lots of headphones on a tram or a train. I go, oh, yes, we're in business today. Because we are. Because people have their phone screen down, so they're listening. They're listening to an audiobook. They're listening to a podcast. They're listening to radio. So first of all, we have to all know that we're all swimming in the same creek and audio is our game. That's the first part because everyone does lose sight to go, oh. But secondly, radio must have that big factor of wow, bold, and we can be there first. I know we talk about live, but live allows us to be first. So if we're not first, we're not there. So as soon as something is breaking, as soon as for the ABC, we've got to quickly move that story and let the audience know as soon as it's happening what is happening, because the audience will consciously make a choice to come to radio, no matter what radio station, to get the development as quick as they can in a simple device like headphones. So that's when I say you must be first, you must be bold, you must really fight hard to get the fact of the story correct. But podcast world, what I love, and I adore podcasts, is the opportunity. I love them. Is that opportunity to be in my own time. Let's face it, we're all time poor. So podcast has found the time poor gap, and it's a big chasm of listeners that are time poor. So there is an opportunity for me even to hit the US Politics podcast at midday with all the US Politics podcasts, because they've taken the entire day of madness and encapsulated that in 40 minutes that I might not necessarily get on radio. So that's where podcasters found their niche. So we have to work to our strengths as quick as possible to be bold and to be first.
Whenever we're talking... Oh, sorry.
If I could just add one thing, which feels fair. No, it feels great. And I think this is a really healthy and playful discussion. I think the idea that people going to the radio is the first thing misses the whole thing that we're all waking up and we're on our phones. We've actually read the news, and then we seek out who we want to hear the take on from that. And I think The Quickie is one of the most successful news podcasts in Australia that has journalists up from 4 a.m. preparing and then pushing that content live and then pushing updates live throughout the day as well. So I think it is important on both sides of this idea that because we're live, can make it a better audience experience. The reality is if you're live for 4 hours, a good portion of that might not be the same quality you could get on a podcast. And so there's definitely benefits to both, I think.
Yeah, right. And the part for that is that how do we as like if you're covering a breaking story, inside our radio shows, we'll still talk about other things happening in the day, but the audience has that immediate hunger to go, yeah, but I want to know that. I want to know the story of the day. But you're like, oh, but we've been talking about it for the past 42 minutes. It's like you've got to keep talking about it. You've got to keep the audience moving and knowing that someone is waking up every minute. I mean, we're talking 6 to 7 minutes of time spent listening. So when you break down your show to go, actually, you're doing 42 shows across 3 hours for these people, that's how you have to think about it and know that, yeah, just because you've been talking about it for 40 minutes doesn't mean that...
7 minutes, interesting.
Yeah. 6 to
52 over here.
I suppose it depends on the
TSL.
structure of the show too, though, because one thing that we love doing is we get listeners who call in, right? Something podcasts can't necessarily do. So when something breaks, though, we'll open the lines and have people commenting on it immediately, and you'd be shocked how much people love hearing the sound of their own voice and they think their opinion is the most important opinion of anyone's. So it's the fact of like instant feedback on the content that you're putting forward and the ability to get a different take on it from someone else, because at the end of the day, you may be one host, two hosts, a team of producers, but it's the involvement with your audience and they feel connected to you in that way as well.
Speaking of how we're all swimming in the same boat, podcasting and radio are sort of two sides of the same coin, is there a difference to how commercial versus public radio is adapting to utilize more podcasts or working with podcasting? Starting with Natalie.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Is there a difference to how commercial radio versus public radio is involving podcasting in their workflow?
I can give you a crack. So you're basically understanding, as public radio, what do we do with podcasting versus what is commercial? Yeah. So from a public radio point of view, our podcast audience, it has to be for all the brand, doesn't it? I mean, public radio, public broadcasting has a brand and an expectation of the audience. So if the ABC make a podcast, it has to hit the values of what people go to the ABC for. Now, in saying that, you have to be different. You have to do things that are different and not be what people view us for. But we have some of the largest listened to podcasts inside, the media landscape. But we've also got some very little to listen to podcasts. We've got some podcasts that aren't that well listened to. So it's all about the value. I think what you're asking with commercial radio is where are they in the podcast space for ARN and so on? And I don't know, where do you stand? I shouldn't be asking the question, sorry.
Look, I mean, in terms of ARN and our podcasting as a whole, I mean, we've got our iHeart network, which has like a strong plethora of different podcasts. I mean, just this week we launched a World Cup podcast, which is timely because the World Cup's coming up. So, I mean, in terms of like, I've only ever really been involved with radio replay podcasts and things like that. But I mean, there's the ability for anything. iHeart's a bigger brand than KISS alone, which is who I work for. So there's a number of different news podcasts, sport podcasts, there's, lifestyle podcasts and things like that. I generally just work on the radio replay ones and we kind of package them up as they air and just do fancy things on the feed to get more listens to little bonus podcasts and things like that. But in terms of podcast creation, I don't really have too much experience in that.
I think the other market leaders there, and it's a shame we can't get BBC Sounds anymore, but the BBC Sounds app was actually a really great way of understanding audio on demand is the word we have to think about to say, I missed my favourite breakfast show, whether it be Greg on Radio 1, whether it be Scott on Radio 2, and they snip that breakfast show up, same as you do, but it's available on the platform, ready. I don't know, I think is it 2-3 steps an app has to hit 3 buttons to get to your show. It's a 3-button rule, 2-button rule sometimes to say, and iHeart, I think is a good example of just opening iHeart, knowing to hit the KISS Breakfast Show, bang, 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 it should be really quick. It's when there's complication in our brands that we get a bit like, oh, you have to open it, but then you have to download it, then you have to be a member, then you have to be this, then you got to send your phone number, then you got a verification. You're adding problems for listeners. So as far as what it is, it's all about accessibility as well.
Absolutely.
You speak on brand. Darcy, how much flexibility do you have when a client comes to you? They've got a brand identity. They've got firm ideas about maybe what they want. What's the process you go through to give them the best product within the constraints that a client will set you?
It's a good question. I think where we've established ourselves is if you're a brand, you know your brand better than anyone. And then we know podcasting pretty well. And they're coming to us because they want us to make that transition. You can't just step into podcasting as a brand by setting up a microphone and hoping for the best. And so a good example is we just launched the first ever podcast for Uber Eats. And they came to us and they're like, we know podcasting is where our audience is and we want to reach them in that space as well. We also want to strengthen the relationships we have with our restaurants. We go, okay, great. So we created a 6-part series where they're talking with people like the founder of Nando's or these great people they have within their network. But we're doing that live. And the greatest thing that's happening in podcasting is video podcasting and an expectation from the audience that if it's engaging enough content, there should be a visual aspect. So we're shooting that in restaurants and we're getting shots of the chef and the flames and like that has been an incredibly successful series for them. And we borrow things from radio that are super fun as well. So we did a secret sound. We did guess the Uber secret sound on the first week before the first episode drops. You can win a year's supply of Uber Eats.
Which, by the way, AI killed that competition for us because now you just play it and ChatGPT will tell you what the sound is. Yeah,
that's wild. So yes, some brands will come in with it's got to be like this, and we go, great, let's adapt it and make sure it works. And then others just give you the keys, like Uber, and say, let's make something fun.
You mentioned how big video is now and expectation from audiences about video. And you referred to democratization before about an $89 mic, people being able to podcast. Do you think it's getting harder for everyone to become a video podcaster, or is it still a price is coming down? Can people do it?
I'd say at this stage, it can be expensive if you want it to be for video podcasting. So when people come into our studio, the price from audio editing to video editing is quite different because you're spending about 4 or 5 hours editing that video. But what I would say is there's great Australian companies like Rode who are coming in and making products that are so much easier to do video podcasting. You've got online options like Riverside where you can just use your webcam and it captures your audio, captures your video, and it allows you to edit it. It is a discussion of whether you should do that though. And I would say you should only be doing video if you can bring something different than what social clips can. And I think every podcast should do your 30 to 60 second social clips. That's how you build that visual connection. And then when you're ready to add more and give your audience more, that's where full-length video podcasting should happen.
You're right there too. Pods like The Rest is Entertainment, I found that only through the social clips and listened to the pod of The Rest is Entertainment, but I would never watch it in a video form. So I think that's one thing. Don't lose your mind on putting an hour and a half of video up if it's not that engaging, whereas 3 solid 30-second clips. And that was my gateway drug to getting to The Rest is Everything, their entire brand. So I think I'm up to The Rest is Science now. So I'm a fan of the brand, but that's the part we do lose is less is more, very clip. And particularly with Kyle and Jackie O, I found myself hyper engaged with their TikTok. I found myself very engaged with their stories, and I found myself listening to the podcast of that day every time I was engaged with the window of that TikTok. But I would never, again, watch K&J at that time. I would not watch a full show in video. So video is the gateway. It's not the answer.
Do you agree with that, Matt?
Yeah, we used video in a couple of different ways on the show. Like socials, for example, Instagram, we'd post stories throughout the show and almost be using it as like a billboard to listen. It was like ads going live as the show. So like within the first 30 minutes of the show, we'd be posting something on socials, basically saying, hey, don't forget, come listen. And we'd hook them in with things. And then, of course, we have other pieces of content. Like socials are so important to what we do now. So we'd have other pieces of content that we'd chop up and they would be posted later in the day. However, depending on what style of thing, if it's something newsworthy, we were chopping that up and getting it up as soon as we could. It's just, I think it's a hugely important tool to what we do now, but you got to know how to use it and how to leverage the socials, because otherwise you could actually be deterring people and they're just like seeing too much of nothing and they're like, meh, I don't care for that page anymore. So if done correctly, it can change, like, you know, a number of things for a show.
Whenever we're talking about changes in the media landscape, there's an obligatory question on AI. And my question to the whole panel is, what is the place of AI going forward in the media, in podcasting, in radio, and what place do you think it should have going forward?
In terms of radio, I mean, believe me, we've tried to do shortcuts and use ChatGPT before. Like, we'll be sitting in a brainstorm and we're all brain dead. We've been up since 3:30 and we'll be like, oh, what are we going to do? And I have tried every prompt to try and get that thing to be creative, and it just, quite frankly, it sucks at the moment. It'll spit out ideas, but they are awful. So I don't think that the AI brain can replace a creative human brain. I don't think that it's ever going to get there, because I just don't think it can keep up with cultural trends and the ability to then adapt those trends into the way that we need it to be. It can't also know the way that your hosts are going to deliver certain things. There's just a huge blockage between what it can do creatively for a brand and a show. But then, you know, I mean, like I mentioned before, it's completely wiped out certain competitions we'll do on air and things like that. There's definitely uses for it. I mean, I'm definitely using it every day to create photos and things like that I'm putting on prep sheets just for a laugh. But I don't think the ability for it to take over the jobs in radio is possible. And also, I don't know if you guys remember, there's a radio station called Cater who tried using a AI host. And, you know, it worked to an extent, but there's no personality in it. It's never going to be better than what a human can do. So, yeah, it can do the job tick, but it can't replace what a live jock taking calls throughout the day and interacting with listeners and doing giveaways. It can't replace that. So I just think that it's definitely not at the stage yet where it's going to come in and swoop in and take over for radio.
And the fact that AI isn't sentient means that it's forever, it requires our input. So it's interesting, you know, when you talk about that, because that's what I found too. And I had this great bit of advice saying the AI output is only as good as your input. So it's what you're actually feeding into the AI that it can give you answers back on, what it's seeing and what it can observe. It can take your ideas and it can ask you questions and it can prompt your thought, but it's not a sentient being. It's gobbledygook. And the other part, and we had this because we were all, I think, similar age, when social media first started, we were all just like babes in the wood, just all posting up, let's get to 1,000 likes and you get a free coffee cup. Every radio station, by the way, has that post. They've all got the 1,000th like gets a coffee cup. You know, we were all really dull for the first few years, and we're doing that with AI. Most of our companies now don't have an AI dedicated person to be that person. You need a guerrilla social media person. We have a fantastic social media person inside our team, a great SMP, who talks to me only about socials, and she doesn't see the radio prism. So she talks about the social prism. She's like, this is where the socials are at, not where the radio's at. So she's very good at that. But we don't have that AI person who goes, this is garbage. And the other part about AI is understanding weekly what AI is doing. Currently, it's eating itself. It's actually eating its own information and regurgitating the wrong information higher and higher, because the AI now is eating the AI. So it's actually this giant circle of eating itself. So you've also got to be really careful with the fact that it's not sentient. It can't be creative. It's a tool like a keyboard, but the electronic Yamaha didn't take over piano players. AI won't take over media. So we've just really got to make sure we understand it's a tool.
Say AI is like my stepsister. When she showed up, it was a bit weird. And then you had to like work out how to live together. And I think that's the stage we're going through of like, man, you're my age and you're a girl, but you're my stepsister, you know? So what I would say is my quick take on it, not that I was whoa. I know you're all thinking and not that. What I would say though is AI from a podcasting perspective is there is such a disconnect when presenters come in and it's so clear they've done their questions on ChatGPT. Podcasting, radio, it's humans. It's human connection, and so you have to put that human lens on. I think from an editing perspective, give it 12 months and it will edit your podcast for you. It's almost there, about 80% there. It can take out ums and ahs and can edit that for you. Again, don't do it for social clips. I see that. Opus clip where they're just dropping video in and it spits out 20, don't do that. Pick your favorite moments. And then where it can be really useful is data. And we all rely on data to do our jobs. And so I had a really great experience yesterday with a podcaster where we downloaded 2 years worth of her numbers from Omni and put that into AI, and it identified the trends of what topics resonate more than other topics. And I think that's a wonderful tool. We also used AI to build out our new marketing platform, which allows podcasters to take a snippet of their podcast and get it up to the Sydney Morning Herald or news.com as a way to promote their little show. And so it has absolute merit, and I think it shouldn't be dismissed as this overlord that's taking it over, but it also should be used pretty wisely.
You mentioned editing there. Are there certain sectors of the media industry that you think will be impacted heavily by AI going forward?
Yep. I think the one thing that's being failed to be mentioned about radio is the amount of redundancies that have happened. Widespread, beautiful, creative people out the door. And I know directly AI has done that. So you've got AI image producers now where they're loading it up and it will make a jingle for you. You've got regional stations that don't have the budget to have 4 or 5 producers being put down to one producer and them being pressured to use AI. So it will make things redundant. From an editing perspective, we kind of pride ourselves that it's all human crafted. And I think when you have a human crafting a story, you get a better story. But I know there's podcast companies, North Sydney, that are using all AI in their editing process. And that's interesting. That is interesting in terms of what the output of that becomes. So yeah, I think it will make people redundant. It already is making people redundant. And that's where kind of leadership comes into play.
Darcy, you had a great anecdote about a conversation you had with your taxi driver this morning. Can you tell us that? And then I'll open a challenge for Nat and Nick.
I love this. This was verbatim. I wanted to do a little bit of market research. I said, why do you listen to the radio? And he says, I listen to it every day. It's 2 GB. And I like to know all the bad things about the world. And I said, oh, that's a hot take. What do you mean by that? He's like, I just like to know all the bad things in the world. And then the rest of my day gets better because I started here and now I'm there.
But crucially, he stays listening to 2GB.
He does, and that's a flaw.
Yeah.
He's got it on all day. So
my challenge to Nat and to Nick is tell us how you would win over Taxi Driver X to KISS or to ABC Local.
Greg was his name.
Well, Greg doesn't sound like our core listener, just so you know. But, you know, every radio station has a different purpose, right? And we've been talking a lot about we're the first ones to, you know, tell you the news. When something breaks, we'll give it to you. But at KISS, for example, that's not really, you know, our bread and butter. We're not a news station. We're an entertainment station. So, yeah, if Britney Spears had another meltdown, you're going to hear it first with us. Whereas if old mate Greg wants to hear about the latest politics in the US, you're not going to hear it from us, most likely. So I think it just depends on who you're talking to and what their preferences are. Because if you want to escape, I would say, the doom and gloom that's happening in the world, you'd probably more likely listen to us, where you can have a more, you know, just day-to-day life problem kind of conversation and escape all that stuff that you're hearing and you're flooded with on your socials as well. So I would say Greg probably wouldn't want to listen to us, and we don't want Greg. No, we want everyone. He can listen.
Now, the problem is, Nick, Greg said he appeared on the ABC as a political contributor. So it's closer to home.
Taxis. Very, very handy. Radio station content all has to be about heart. Everyone does think it's content. It's not. It's the heart. It's the heart of why. So I will do absolutely a Sydney listen all week, and I'll go through all of the Sydney stations where our audience is intersecting with their audience, and we all come together. So it's all down to the heart of how a story hooks me and holds me, and it's habitual as well. I don't know why we don't understand that people listen to 2GB every day and think that if they filled out a form, they think they only listen for 15 minutes, but they're probably on for 2 hours. GB, and I'll credit GB to say they have great heart talkback callers, and that's what we must do as well. We do that. But whenever they've got a talkback caller on, it goes to the heart quick. it gets to you feeling something. And that has to be the same for Kiss Brekkie at the moment. It has to be the same for Christian O'Connell, even though he's, Kiss and Christian spanning two cities. It's down to heart. How does it make you feel? How do you engage? My wife habitually watches the Today Show every day and would only think, again, she's in it to watch, the first bad news of the day, but she's in it for Carl. Carl is the other man in my life. And it could be worse. It could be worse. She could like Koshi. But habitual connection is what we're there for. So I get really quite cranky sometimes when people go, "Oh, we did a really great story." Yeah, but what was the heart? And people go, oh, okay. Because, even if you break a story, congratulations, you've just handed the competition the story you have broken, and the ownership goes to someone else sometimes. Like some of the stories the ABC has covered or other media has covered hasn't necessarily come from us. It could be broken from an independent publisher who goes, I've broken that story. How did you distribute it? Oh, I wrote it. I didn't put anything more to it. And then everyone then jumps on it and runs with it. So heart owns stories. I've seen radio rise to beautiful heights off a breaking story. And we had some very tragic events late last year in Sydney where all of Sydney radio rose to the occasion. No one broke it. No one talked about who was there first. It was who had the most heart. And that I heard across the board was how it is. So does that answer that question in a way?
Yeah.
So how do I get him?
Well,
how do I get him? I'm going to just ride every taxi until I find him. But let's face it, every radio person does hop in the taxi and we lean over.
I get them to change it. I'll say I don't want to listen to this.
I listened. I had a guy who had FBI full bore. And he's like, "This is just the best station, mate." I'm like, okay, so look, I don't mind a moderate volume, but yeah, and I love all of it. But I also like to ask why they listen. One guy who I chatted to once years ago when I flew in from Dubbo, and he had Kiss just blaring in the taxi. And I said, "Oh, why do you love it?" And he goes, "Mate," he goes, "only thing that's the energy. It's the energy, mate. It's the energy. It's all energy for him, like drinking a Monster at 6 a.m. for him. It was just he wanted that energy. He's not in it for anything else. And that's the heart. It's how it moves people. So it should speak to that."
Looking at just how much the industry changes over time, especially for new people going into the industry, if each of you had to restart your career over and get to the place you are currently at in the shoes of someone with no experience in 2026, how would you go about that and how would it differ to how you did it initially?
How would I be me if I wasn't me but to be me?
Pretty much.
we're asking you to dissociate on stage.
Well, I've just gone through a recruitment period where I've had to hire people. And it is interesting. One of the people I hired, his background was radio. And I think that says a lot. And I have a background in radio. Our lead video producer has a background in radio. And so I don't think you have to worry about is it one or the other. I think you have to worry about honing your craft because you can be shit in both. So be great in one. And then if you ever want to transition, that will be a much easier journey. Yeah, but I would do the same thing I did. I think radio is an incredible environment to learn producing high quality content in a short turnaround time. And that's ultimately what pays the bills.
Yeah, I got to say, I have a bachelor in journalism that I've never used. So I probably wouldn't do that because that just feels like a waste. I also went to the Australian Film, Television and Radio School, which I'd say is beneficial, like learning. That was more hands-on experience. So in terms of my radio career, I mean, I started in sales, did a bit of time in reception. I worked overnight. I was doing anything just to get a job. But all of those skills that I learned along the way have somehow helped me in the end. Like even when I'm chatting to, a department and they're talking about spots and dots, I'm like, I know that from sales. So I think the fact that I've worked across a number of roles within the industry, like it's a foot in the door, right? And you learn so much more about, I've worked with so many producers who's only ever worked in radio and they don't understand any of that side of the business, which is hugely important. So for me, I mean, across the 13 years I've worked in radio, I've done operations, I've done all that kind of thing. And I think it all shapes the kind of where I am now. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where you just say yes to every opportunity in radio because it's never not going to benefit you.
Can I add to that just quickly, because I think this is really important? Afters was my dream. Like, I was like, I just absolutely want to go to Afters. It's the pinnacle of the media landscape. But I didn't have the money to go to Afters. And I think it's a really important thing to note that you don't have to have that HEX fee to achieve greatness in this industry. And for me, I had to go a different route, and that was volunteering at a radio station, learning from the people around me. And now when I'm hiring, you're hiring based on practical experience like that. So don't feel like you have to go to Afters and that's the only way you could get a job in the industry. There's so many other pathways.
Well, I can add to that by sharing the experience that when I left high school, all I wanted to do was go into radio. And I put in to go to Swinburne, which was the Melbourne equivalent of Afters. And I'd saved up all this money and ready to go, and I was going to go live in Hawthorne, had the interview, it all went great, and I didn't get into Swinburne. And I got the letter and went, hang on, I had to reread this letter a couple of times to understand that that's not what was going to happen for me. So you're right. All I did then was attend a 1 hour a week course in Melbourne. I had to go from Bendigo to Melbourne on a Tuesday night, had to get home at 1 a.m. I had to work in McDonald's for a year, which taught me a lot about real life. Lived experience, by the way, is the best thing for your media career. Everything you are doing is all lived experience that will help you in your career. I don't know why people think that you just have to be in the media to be good. Some of the greats have, been fruit picking or done whatever they've done. It's interesting you mentioned radio sales. Walking in the shoes of others gets you to understand. I was talking to someone during the week, a young person, and a young person. Oh, I remember that. And they were talking about, what they wanted to do our regional radio. And I love grumpy people in regional radio. Not jerks, but I love grumpy people because I'm like, what makes you grumpy? Why are you grumpy? Because once you understand grumpy, you understand their walk of life, why they're a bit grumpy, why they're tired, why they're burnt out. And then once you've walked in their shoes, you can understand how to motivate them, work with them. But when people walk in and go, well, I'm going to change that person, good luck. It's all about understanding the grumps, the curmudgeons, also the highly excitable people, the nerd, working with all of those people and knowing who you are and your brand as well, which was interesting talking about that before. If you were to ask me how I'd get there again, it would be to know that we were all on huge money when we started in radio. I worked for Bill Corrales and I was on $23,000 a year. And
I stepped up to 35.
I was 36.
Ooh.
I was a big spender over here.
Yeah. They used to fly our check-in on a Thursday on a plane and we used to cash it at the Soldiers Club because that was the quickest way to get our money. But all of that experience in my 20s was the 38 hours I did their work, the rest of it was my time. So I used to go in after hours and learn how production worked, learn how, back in the day, Cool Edit worked. Learn as much as you can. You get all these tools. If you say, do you mind if I go Cocoa Bananas on the tools? And they go for your life. I learned how to make jingles, sound effects, multi-track editing, went with sales reps. I ended up doing radio sales for 2 years myself. Best learning curve you'll ever have in your life is how to walk into a business and ask them to buy air. Hello, I'd like you to buy something that you can't really measure. Then, yeah, that's really encouraging. So, yeah, to answer your question, yes and for everything.
Right. Well, thank you very much. We have just a bit of time to throw to the audience for some questions. So we'll open it up to the floor then.
Please put your hands up if you have any questions for the panelists. Yes?
Hi, Jacob. I've got a question for Darcy. With so much discussion around video podcasting, do you think audiences connect more deeply with video conversations or audio conversations? And why?
I think audio, if I'm honest. I think, again, side note, video highlights, absolute necessity. But my favorite show in the world started doing video podcasts and I've watched it once. And I listened to that show 4 times a week. And it's because the theatre of the mind is such a powerful thing. We want to imagine what they look like and fill in the gaps. And there's something about that very human nature thing. So I think video will have its place, but I think also, like all things, they become the biggest trend and then it comes back. I think at the moment it's a little bit over-indexed. We don't need a huge amount of video podcasts. We don't. But some should. Hope that answers your question.
Another question over here. Hi everyone, my name's Ellen. I'm a radio and podcasting student, and I was wondering, I know being yourself is going to be everyone's superpower in the industry, but if there was a radio host or a podcast host, even a certain program that you wish that every radio student could learn from, who would that be and why? Whether that's their delivery or the heart that they bring to their program.
I could jump in quickly, just for the answer for us is recently, unfortunately, he's just passed away, as James Valentine, a person who was so deeply in love with his audience that it was felt right across the building. So if you're going to talk about someone who understands, loves and enjoys audience, then his work is available online. Get in there, have a listen, and it's a masterclass.
I would say Armchair Expert by Dax Shepard. They are amazing from how they approach interviews, how they program that channel. So on a Tuesday, they'll interview a celebrity with a mental health focus. On a Thursday, they'll interview a Harvard law professor. Plus now they've introduced the traditional listener stories and engagement there. Incredible show. I would recommend that.
I'll throw one in. I'm going to say Gordy, who's our day announcer at KISS. Why? Because he's mental, but in the best way. So being a daytime music announcer, basically all you have to do is on loop the same call now to win this, then you win this, then next this song coming up. Like the form guiding on a daytime jock shift is so tight that to make it sound like you're so excited about it every 15 minutes is a true craft, and he does it in such a way. And there's certain music jocks around the country who have this really great way at constantly bringing that promotion or that song they've heard a million times to life. And I think that that deserves some credit for those people because, you know, time spent listening low and it's just constantly the same thing on loop. So I think if you listen to those people and actually put that lens on it of, you realise they've said this same thing 50 times today. And how have they sold it this time? Because they're probably coming up with a new way every time. Sometimes you'll listen and be like, what did he just do? But you're like, good on him because it's a different way of doing it. And I think it's fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much. Oh, one more.
Sorry, yeah, hi.
We're going to blow our time out.
My
We're
name's
radio
Verity. I guess it's more of a podcasting and storytelling question.
Suckaluckers.
There seems to be, like when podcasting first emerged, it was a bit of a style of kind of Radio National, old-fashioned feature-length stories with some sound effects and, you know, longer form interviews and stuff. And podcasting and audio storytelling seems to, in Australia, have moved away from that kind of This American Life or BBC Stories kind of style to being really personality driven. Do you think there's still room in our audio landscape for story? So for story with richness and depth and that takes time, or is it just audiences don't come to it?
1,000%. And I mean, people with huge profiles, you see them more often. And so, yeah, it absolutely gives that impression that unless you come off Married at First Sight, you can't do a podcast. We just developed a true crime series where they got back from the US, recording audio over there, walking in footsteps. It's huge amount of audio that's come back. And we've shaped that into a incredible kind of audio storytelling display. There's other podcasts I've worked on where, like Kindling Kids, for example, where they're doing a story about going to the Australian Museum and seeing dinosaurs and there's sound effects and that type of thing. What I would say is if numbers matter, don't do podcasting. It will hurt your ego. But if finding the right niche audience matters, which I think is really powerful, I think podcasting still can be a special place to do that and do that well.
Just with that too, it's the consistency. It's having consistency. I'm a great lover of the narrative podcast. I think Australia makes some incredible podcasts for narrative, and true crime series I do love and full compliment. But I'll just mention two for the ABC that I get into every time, and their narrative and they're strong is Expanse, which is an ABC podcast that actually came out of the division I was in, but its storytelling ability is lots of sound effects, lots of walkthrough, take me there, take me to that moment, which is a beautifully made podcast and mainly focuses on regional storytelling, so it's not city-based. And Unravel, of course, which is, Blood on the Tracks is one of the greatest podcasts we've ever made. But again, it's high level. But you're right about numbers. If you are only in it for the numbers, it just will break your heart every time. And the same goes for most measurements. But the other part about the personality, and I hope they don't either see it, I actually thought Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen's podcast would be really good. It sucked. And they were just so into not talking about the audience that's the other part too, is that every superstar will come on and do a podcast. Oh my God, guys, it's just me unfiltered. And you really need a filter because you need a great EP and you need someone who will kick your butt. And you can hear the podcasters that do such a lousy job because they don't have a great EP, they don't have someone in their corner. So I'm never worried about the superstar who goes, oh my God, it's me, totally let loose, blah, blah, blah. It's like, whatever. I've seen, I think we're up to 3,000 of them now. Like everyone, tells us what's going on in life or whatever. It's all about story. So yeah, lots of heart. And I love production and long live Dolly Parton's America, the greatest narrative podcast I ever listened to. See.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Well, yeah, of course we do. We have all the time in the world.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a journalism student. I was just wondering, in the podcasting radio world, how journalists are going to fit when we graduate. What roles are there? Thank you.
I think one thing we ask for or wait for is permission. We wait for someone, whether it's ABC or someone who we already trust, to say, go and do this. And I think there is so many untold stories out there that require you just getting a microphone and starting. And it will be the most wonderful way to refine your journalism storytelling by doing that and doing that in excess and doing that weekly and getting over the nerves of putting yourself out there, because we just all have that. That's what I would say. There's a place there for you now. And you've committed by studying it. Now just commit to actioning it.
I think the other part about journalism's place, and Nat mentioned you did Bachelor of Journalism, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
You actually carry it all the time. I think people don't think that journalism is news. Journalism is this tale of storytelling. It's a storytelling platform of how we do this. Now, I'm not a trained journalist, but I'm a storyteller. Journalism teaches you how to move audiences, bring people with you, how to get accuracy, how to get heart, how to get connection. Journalism isn't the practice of news, it's the practice of story. So it has helped you, Nat, because it is the practice of story. So is there a place for journalism every day of the week? But it's how to tell the untold, how to move away from the pack sometimes, how to not follow the pack, how to take your time. The best person I ever met in the ABC was a person who said, I work on blinker theory in the country. And I said, what's blinker theory? And she goes, whenever you see something on the side of the road looks weird, just hit the blinker and pull over and go, what's that? And you find the weirdest and most wonderful people on the side of the road. She would do it.
Now.
She's now a true crime podcast. Yeah, she loved, and she would come back with all of these stories. And particularly being out in regional areas where I've worked for so long is the connection to country is really important. So talking to Indigenous people is one of the great honours I've had working in most of the regs that I've been in, because those stories take time. If you shove a microphone under an elder's nose, you'll quickly get shown the door, because it's about the connection. That's what journalism teaches you, is connection and how to tell a story. So you're storytellers, you're not news chasers.
If it's okay with the panelists, I'm going a bit unorthodox here. I actually have a question myself. Darcy, you mentioned that if you were to start over, you would recommend honing your craft and focusing on what you're good at and getting really good at that until you move on to other things. I feel like that it really differs from what media students are being told every single day. You need to have skills in as many different disciplines as possible, because everything is sort of amalgamating into the same role. And I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on that sort of sentiment. Do you think that you're disadvantaging yourself at all by honing one craft?
It's a good question. Gotta be careful because I'm going to contribute to the curriculum next year. So, but what I would say is what I meant by that is I started in radio at 14 when I went and volunteered every week and honed audio production, and I really lent in on that. What will always be valuable, so I'll stick by my answer, what will always be valuable is being excellent at something. There's enough generalists out there, and AI is also going to do a lot of what the fluff that you might be doing. I would say become excellent at something and very competent in the other skills.
I think the industry just requires you to be extremely adaptable as well, because it's moving so fast and progressing at such a pace. Even when I was working within this ridiculously large team, we'd never had someone who could only do one thing. You've got to have the ability to be able to have, jump into another role. You've got to be flexible. So like I always say to my producers, like you're not only a content producer, you're a social media producer too, if that requires. You also may have to jump in and edit an interview and become an audio producer. So although their specialism is like there is doing content and producing content for a radio show, they also know how to do a number of other things. And I think that means that, down the line as well, they're not pigeonholing themselves into one role because they've got exposure to a number of different areas in the business, which goes back to our question of like, how would we change our journey to where we got to? That's why I wouldn't change mine, because I know sales, I know operations, which for me was extremely boring, but other people love it. But I know back end why the play-out system happens the way it does now. So I just think, once you know what you're good at, you'll lean into that more. But it definitely helps to have like a, plethora of skills that you can, even if it's a tiny bit, you're tapping into it somewhere at some point.
And there's lots of careers that are broad, like nursing is broad. So people have a passion when they go to nursing. They don't just go, looking forward to taking the BP of every patient through the hospital and waking them up at 2 o'clock to take their BP. But what I'm actually thinking with nursing is that I'm going to learn a broad array of everything about nursing, but I'm passionate about aged care or palliative care or paediatrics or whatever that might be. People will lean to a discipline, but they'll also know how to deal with infirm patients as well as paediatrics. They'll learn those broad skills as an RN, but they'll have a passion. So take your passion, make it happen. Thank you. Wise words. But I think the other part about that is, know that the other skills are useful. I had to learn television 10 years ago when I moved to Dubbo because I was the editor, and I'd never worked in television. So I just rang people and said, tell me about television. And they did. And they were really great to understand TV news, 90 seconds. And then I had to learn digital articles, and it's the first 2 pars or forget it. So those sort of things. I had to do legal training as well. And a former sales rep learning legal training was entertaining. But it's those things that you will learn. And no, I'm not passionate about legal training, but I know it. The skills are important for your job. And then you've got your passion.
Yeah.
Thank you all for a wonderful panel. Let's thank Nick Lauber, Darcy Milne, and Nat Penfold.
Thank you.
So we will be taking a short lunch break now until 1 p.m. Please stick around for our next panel on journalism in 2026, headlines to hashtags.
I should be on the one.
Yeah. Please give everyone another round of applause. Thank you so much.